So in the last couple of videos, what we have done is to have designed the models to implement the interface for setting up the transaction head and the subhead. So specifically in the last video, we designed the controller that takes charge of listing the existing transaction heads that are in the system. And we ended up with this interface for exposing the existing records in the system. So, and we achieved that by implementing the view that is attached to the presenter that's meant for that screen. So, in continuation, now we've been able to implement the part that loads the screen, and what we did was, as a reminder, when you click new, we designed a separate interface to cater for a new record. So from the application model, we're able to see the views that were automatically created for us. And the ones that were done now is this one, because the business model object that we're using are non-persistent objects, so they are not connected to the database. As a reminder, all our interaction with the database is going through the presenters. So we have been able to feed the data to this transaction head view model list view, and that is what we're looking at here. So there are a couple of things that the system does automatically for you. Now, because we had defined the business objects of the transaction head and we included the listing of the subhead, the interface for editing automatically comes in this view. This is for viewing it in read only, while to edit, you click the edit button. So this is an interface that was automatically done just because we enable the relationship between the transaction head view model and the listing of the subhead view model. So one of the things that was done again for free is that by the time we now click on the new at the subhead level, it gives us this interface to actually set up the data required for the subhead setup. Though right now we have not linked it up to the presenter, but we just needed to let you know that some of these things are done automatically by the system. So the next thing we want to do now is when we click on this a record on this view, yes, it has taken care of the populating the details of the transaction head, but we want to list the subhead. So that is the next thing we're going to do. What it means is that we're going to create a controller that controls this view, and this is a detail view. While this is a list view, this is a detail view, and it is still the same detail view, but when you click on the edit, it shows it in edit mode. But if you click on the record, it shows you in read-only mode. So let's design just that now. So the first thing we do is we're going to look at creating a controller to control this page. And how do I do that? You go to the bottom. So we want to create a controller. So we're going to keep it in the controller folder. And I can't keep this code. So what we're going to now do is that we are now going to populate the list view here, and we need to create the controller. So the naming convention is we come to create view controller, and we paste in the transaction head view model, but this time around it is the detail view controller. So we now need to scope this detail view controller. We need to scope it to this screen. So how do you do that? You go to properties. We want it to be attached to this view. Come here, put, we change this one back to any. Then it is meant for object type is the transaction head view model. Object type is transaction head view model. Then the view type is the detail view. So these parameters has now scoped whatever we're doing here, has scoped it to this particular screen. So the first thing we want to do, we leave this one as view controller because it's controlling a detail view, unlike the initial one we did that is actually an object controller. This one is left at a detail, a view controller. So one of the things we're going to do firstly is to implement the interface for the presenter. So, like I said in the former video, this presenter is not in conformity with single responsibility principle. So everything about the parameters is implemented in just this single controller. And sorry, I'm supposed to implement the view, not the presenter. The presenter will need the view. So on the controller, we implement the view. Yes. And we are interested, for the starters, we're interested in only the part that is going to put data here, which is, the part that we're going to concern ourselves with. So I borrow some code from this list view. I know that I am going to need this generic object. So the whole idea is that anyone that I don't really need, I'm going to be to write it to this generic object. Now, when there's an error from the presenter, what we will do is to propagate it out. And now the head lists, transaction head list, we don't need this. So I'll just put this any placeholder is equals to value. The selected transaction head ID, yes, we do need this. And don't forget this controller is talking to this view model. It's for this view model. So this part is going to be pointing to the particular transaction head that is selected in the view. And how do we get that? Now, since this is a property of the view called the current object, we are going to cast it to the view model that we are controlling, which is this. So the view dot the current object is a property of it called the OID, which is the ID. Then if it is going to be set, it will still be the same property. On this screen, the code is already set by the system. So we can this one empty. It makes sense when I am true. if you watch the video on how to create the record, you will see where we use this code and description to create the transaction header. So let me copy this. So this is the list. This is the particular list that we're customizing until we will come back later and write down. But in the meantime, now, so I'm just using this placeholder for all the ones I don't require. So can even copy as I think the shortcut is to copy this. Yeah, and move faster now. Once I can copy it because it's the same interface that was implemented in the previous video. So now I need to now implement this part. So for each item, now on the view model, this is the model that holds the whole thing. So let's call it new record. Let's instantiate it. That one has been instantiated. Now we will cast the current object is equals to, this is exactly what we want, because every view has what we call a current object. So we're in the context of the transaction head view model. So once we have the current object here, we can manipulate it, including its lists. So right now, we are going to add the current object as the subhead list, and we are going to add this new reg to it. So this is where we now need to be a little bit creative, because the new reg dot code is straightforward. Show in the item as the code, and the new reg dot description is equals to item dot description. And the ID, which is the primary key, is the ID coming from this. So here we left it as good. You can go there and adjust it. We change it to int, because our database tables all contain integer as primary keys. So for the stub of this one, so this is resolved. Now in the interface, actually, it shows the code description, the transaction head. We will remove this one, but we need to show something here. And the shortcoming of this is that the chart here is a structure, which is our chart view model. But now it has all these things that we don't want to process at this level. So one of the things we're going to do is that what is in the item, you can see the chart is just a string. It's just string. Hmm. So we need to come to our view model and do something. We will have two property here, a private property. We will call it display value. What we do is now the default display for this model is the chart code. So we can change it by defining constructor for a chart model, calling it display value. Now, when we get it, now what I am doing here now is to be able to display what the current presenter is giving to us for existing records, while when we are creating the subheads, it will be a totally different experience. So what we will do now is we're going to come to the chat code. We're going to write this logic. If we use the long and pass, so what this means now is that once we cannot resolve the chat code because they're all null, where it means that this is a scenario where we're trying to load the view just to display here. So what will happen is what will now appear here is what the presenter is sending to us, which is just a string representation of the chat. It will become clearer as we proceed. So here, what I will just do is there's no need to set any property again. I will just take the item and pass in the chat. So we have the chat and everything is in place. For now, this will display the records. So the next thing is to instantiate the presenter. presenter is this. I can actually borrow the code from the one I did here. It's exactly the same code. So we have the presenter. And it is instantiated here. So on activation, on activation, we just call presenter dot init form. I go to the implementation. See that that is what we need. We need to call init form. So build it. Okay. So can still do this. I've got to, there's still one more property, which is the transaction head. So, and we're in the context of that transaction head. So the code is equals to current code, and the description is equals to current description. The ID is equals to current ID. Let's go into that. So what we have just done is we have just populated this structure with the OID, the code, the description. Oh, sorry, the structure here is this one: OID, the code, and the description. These are the three things that is just required to relate the head and the subhead together. Okay, So let's debug and see why it's not loading. So I put a breakpoint here because this is the code that must run for that grid to be filled up. Put a breakpoint here. So what it means is that so if that is the case and it still did not hit that breakpoint, it means in the presenter init from if selected subnet. Okay, this is where we're supposed to keep. This is what the code we wrote here is supposed to be here. So it means this one was for the, you see, this is the reason why I said this is the a badly designed presenter. It is overloaded. Now this one is meant for the interface when you are creating the transaction head. It's not meant for what I'm using it for. So pretty confident that it will work now. So I'm going to run it in debug mode. I'm going to run it straight from the browser. Close this one. Okay, so still didn't run. Just make sure everything is okay. Transaction ready. Identity is check the presenter again. Read from this transaction. So let's select the transaction. Okay. So selected transaction. Okay. Okay. So let's run it in the book mode again and see. So this is the presenter asking for the value of this. Okay, I can see the reason why now this is not populated. The reason why this is not populated is because it wasn't populated when we filled it up. So we're going to go to that interface and you can see put this here. That's the reason why. So we can move this breakpoint and build it, run it in the browser straight. Now, I'm sure we've now touched part of the application where we need to run it. Oh, okay. This is on the assumption that the economic code will always be available. So, do the same thing too. So, the statement if it is not equal to null, we get what's inside, but if it's null, just put empty string. Now, let me do this again. Build it. Okay, so I'm going to run because I've lost started it in the right manner. So, so what we need to do is clean this thing up. Here, we don't need to display the transaction head because we are already in the context of the transaction head itself. So I'm going to this interface here and tell the model itself that I also don't want this field to be browsable. Build it. Yes. So that is it. And also in edit mode. That's it. So in the next video, we are going to make the controller for adding to the subhead. Thank you. As a recap, what we have done is we have designed a controller for the detailed view, and we've implemented the view that the presenter requires, and particularly laying emphasis on the code required to put data on the grid view. Suspecting that this might not be required, let me confirm it. Because once you are writing to the object, I think it's enough for the UI to yes, I was right. It's not required. So what we're going to be doing throughout the building of this app is building controllers to take over the default screens that are views that were designed by the framework and implementing the presenter views for interfacing with the existing presenters and writing the part of it that concerns the view that we're looking at, implementing it. So that is just the same thing we'll be doing all over and over again. So in the next video now, we are going to now design how to add to this list. Because I know that the last record here has nothing there. So see you in the next video.